Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Yeah, why don't you do that? You email me. That'd be nice. I always love hearing from you. Hi, how you doing? It's Wednesday. It's the 4th, of November. And it's, I've been using the adjective autumnal. It is not autumnal. What's the adjective for summer that's like autumnal? Summer-ish? I mean, autumnal is such a lovely word. It's autumnal. It's summer-like-ish. Like, there's no such word. Summerall. No. It's like summer. It's ridiculous. Closing in on, like, what? 80 today? Jeez. I mean, we'll take it. We will take it. But I don't think is there an equivalent spring? No, I don't know. Never mind. I'll shut up. Okay. All right, election. Yay, us. Everybody I wanted to win except Heather Arnay won in Pennsylvania, as far as I know. And I'm most appreciative. Democrats and good people. I mean, the three that got elected yesterday, Doherty, Donahue, Wecht, are three good people and three smart cookies. And three people who won't be sending porn or engaging in felonious activity, people of good character. And now Democrats have a real strong control of the state Supreme Court, which is good, and can potentially ameliorate some of the mischief that might be done, if anything ever does get done, by the Republican-controlled legislature. So that is good. In our neighboring state of Ohio, that attempt at a corporatized 1% takeover of legalized pot in the Buckeye State went down to fiery defeat. I mean, it got clobbered, even though the polls were showing 50-50-ish. It lost every county, in every single county in Ohio, and lost big in every single county by like 2-1. So people woke up to what that was about. So I mean, that was like, those were the votes of people who would never vote to legalize marijuana, but it was a ton of votes from people who would vote to legalize marijuana, but not to essentially have the state constitution give the lucrative market to an entity made up of about 10 billionaires or multimillionaires, I guess. So that's good. They did the right thing there. And I don't know, they're making a big deal about this Republican winning the governorship in Kentucky. This is a guy who, man, he stood behind Kim Davis. He stood with Kim Davis. He is with Kim Davis. Now he's the governor. And Kentucky had been one of the sort of anomalous southern-ish states that has elected a lot of Democratic governors in modern times. And it was a Democrat that was term limited out, which led to this guy winning. Most unfortunate. It's weird, a state like that. So they send the country, Mitch McConnell, and what's his name? Rand Paul. Those are their two senators. And yet, for years and years and years, decades and decades, they have voted a Democrat to run their state. While they send us, those lunatics, to muck up the national legislature. I just don't get it. I don't get anything anymore. I'm really bewildered. But to watch, the jerks on CNN and MSNBC, they immediately... And what does this mean for 2016? The fact that this one guy won one race is supposed to mean something. And they brought on journalists who said he was a Trump-like figure. The establishment, the Republican establishment, did not want this guy in. They did not. So he was anti-establishment Republican. He's grandiose, rides around in a gold Escalade, and that's how he, it's repulsive. How he, and I don't know. I guess if you become a nation in which the greatest industry is entertainment, and everything has to entertain us. And now we look at our politics, and Trump's figured this out. He's just unabashed about it. He's winning because he's a performer. He's figured it out that there's a whole ton of Americans who long ago lost the ability to distinguish between reality and, I don't know, performance and artifice. Because when things called reality shows, total misnomers, they have nothing to do with reality, the reality shows. So when the very definition of reality gets skewed like that, and millions of us sit in front of our TVs it's gotta do damage. It just does. And speaking of America doing damage, I want to return, if I may, to a topic we talked about yesterday, which is this startling finding by the Nobel-winning economist and his wife, who analyzed all this data on life expectancy in America and when people are dying, and have come up with something that others looking at the report, nobody's saying it's not true. Everybody's saying, wow, jeez. And it is that essentially it's the baby boomers are dying. White baby boomers are dying or committing suicide at an extraordinary rate. And they're dying of things that are not the usual. They're not dying of heart disease. They're not dying of cancer. They're dying of alcohol and drugs and suicide, which we can say despair. Alcohol, drugs, and despair. And it is such a demographic anomaly since every other group, including African American and Hispanic baby boomers, male, female, every other age group, everything, everybody's life expectancy is increasing. These guys, all that's increasing is the rate of early death. And I've read more about it since yesterday, and it just gets more and more extraordinarily sad. So the age group that they're talking about is 45 to 64, which is the hunk of the baby boomers. That's the baby boomers. There's a few older ones. When did baby boomers start? I think my brother's considered one, and he's nearing 70. So there's like, they're the oldest baby boomers are not in this demographic, but I think all the rest are. And deaths from drug overdoses among people 45 to 64, whites only, increased 11-fold in the last 20 years. And nearly, get this, and you talk about, our perceptions of, okay, if I say heroin user, what do you think? What picture comes to your head? 90% of people who try heroin for the first time now, they're white. Heroin users are white. And almost all found heroin because of their doctor, their trusted, white-coated doctor. They had an operation, they had a twisted ankle, they got a little surgery, and no matter what happens, you are given opioids, a prescription. And a lot of people, obviously an extraordinary number of people, become addicted. And the docs usually keep them going for a while, and then the docs get freaked and say, hey, I can't give you any more. There's no way that this should be. And so they go to heroin, which is an opioid. Heroin, Oxycontin, Percocet, Vicodin, it's all the same. Heroin. So our medical establishment, big pharmaceuticals, all that, they have a big thing to do with, they have a big part of the blame. Listen to this that comes out of this. Life expectancy for a white female high school dropout. Well, that's the other thing in this demographic that's seeing this decline. Education plays a role too. So that white baby boomers in this age range who are college educated are excused. They aren't figuring in this. They are not. It is no college education, even a little college education, apparently pulls you out of this demographic that's dying. So that the life expectancy for a white female high school dropout has fallen so much over the last 18 years that these women are now expected to die 5 years younger than their mothers. Here's another aspect to this. Nearly half of Americans in their 40s and 50s do not have any money for retirement. They don't have any financial cushion at all. And we know this is true. I think the number's higher than half. And we've already talked about the fact that manufacturing jobs, good paying jobs for people who aren't college educated, are gone. And so these people have no jobs, they got no savings, they got no money, and they often don't have health care or insurance. And here's the thing. In other countries, any European country, take your pick. In any other European country, that same demographic, non-college, educated, white folks, baby boomers, their life expectancy is still on the increase. It's only America So, what is it about America? Well, I'll tell you one thing it is. The 2009 recession, we want to thank the big banks. We want to thank Wall Street. We want to thank Republican policies. You remember the recession that, got Barack Obama elected, I think? The recession really wiped out anything that these people had. Think if you're 50, you've lost your job, your health is not great, you don't have insurance, you're too young for Medicare or Medicaid, you've got nothing. You've got despair, is what you got. In France, in England, in the Netherlands, Germany, you name it. The difference is in those countries, comfortable pensions for retirees are guaranteed. Boy, does that pull a lot of stress out of the picture. Whoa. So if you're European and you're a white baby boomer, you don't have to lose sleep that you are literally going to be homeless and starving in retirement. And this is because America, again, pushed by corporate America, got rid of pensions, moved to the, 401ks. And then if a recession like that, the recession just wiped out a lot of people's savings. And they got no pension coming. So the idea of financial insecurity is a much greater burden on Americans. And don't discount what that level of stress and despair can create. Suicide, ill health, early death, alcoholism, drug addiction. So we're crushing the life out of people in this country. I don't know. So it's less educated baby boomers who are dying like no other demographic group on earth at the moment, or in countries like ours. Of course, there's no country like ours. God knows. So the guy who did this figured this out, Angus Deaton, said this to the Washington Post. What this all means is that there's easily about 500,000 Americans who are dead right now that should not be dead. 500,000. If that's not like a crisis, then what is? 500,000 Americans dead that should not be dead, the Nobel laureate said. He said, this is 40 times the Ebola stats. This is right up with HIV/AIDS. And it took us a while to respond to the HIV/AIDS thing, right? Because, it wasn't happening to us, it was happening to those gay people. We woke up, eventually. Well, this is happening to white people, but it's happening to white people who don't count for much. And they know it. And that adds to the despair, too. But this country, when you think that, economic policies or allowing the private sector to control so much, if you think that doesn't have an impact, not only on individuals, but then on the macro, on the big picture. And thank God for Angus Deaton and his wife, because they actually saw the forest for the trees. They looked, they saw, and they said, wait a minute. 500,000 of us are dead. Dead essentially from despair, lack of opportunity, lack of education. They're dead. I'm here to tell you, this is a huge story. Middle-aged white Americans are dying by the hundreds of thousands of despair. Pretty incredible. Oh, Chuck, thank you. I didn't see it. He came up with a I've never heard of that word. He came up with an adjective like autumnal for summer, which is estival. Estival? Oh, what a lovely estival day in November. But see, nobody would know what I was talking about.
Just thought of one for spring.
What's for spring?
Vernal.
Vernal. Oh, okay. So, okay, well then, oh, all right. I'm on to you now. Okay, yeah.
Set off the light bulb.
When a sunny day in April has an estival feel to it, it's one of those days that seems so much like summer. You might be tempted to go, okay, that's what it says. Okay. It's rarely used, usually found in formal writing. Yeah, because nobody knows what it means, and how can you communicate if nobody knows what it means? However, there's no reason not to use it when you want to describe something that has to do with summer, like a blue estival sky. That's what we got here. Guys, we got a blue estival sky. It comes from the Latin word estus, or heat. There are equivalent adjectives for the other seasons too. Autumnal for autumn, hibernal for winter, hibernal, meaning we're all hibernating, hibernal, and vernal, yes, for spring. Well, there you have it. And Margie just sums it up. What a beautiful day in Pittsburgh. Yes, you are correct. So that we have. Did you hear about this poor guy from, where is he from? Italy?
Yeah.
In the marathon? God. For those of you who didn't hear, is this a story that's all over the place? Because I shouldn't, it is.
New York Times.
I know the New York Times, not everybody reads the New York Times, but this is the kind of story that like CNN and all the usuals would be after. But if in case you haven't, this poor guy ran the marathon. He speaks no English at all. He was with a group of other Italians, and he sort of fell behind the group, so that when he finished the marathon, he finished in respectable time, 4 hours something. It was his first marathon. And he was a guy who was a recovering addict. And someone said about him, where the center where he had been treated said, he is certainly a fragile, vulnerable, and very emotional person who, after years of drug dependency, found the chance to recover. So he had really, and he ended up somehow running in the New York Marathon, and when he finished, he couldn't find his friends, and he'd had a little a little fanny pack on him or something that had his hotel key or something, and a map, a subway map, and somehow they disappeared in the course of the marathon. And he had nothing, and he just started wandering around. He slept in the park near the end for the first night. Poor guy. He really didn't know what to do. And then he thought, well, wait, we were going to fly out. He knew that if he got to Kennedy Airport, he could maybe find his friends because they were all going to fly back. So he goes to Kennedy Airport, somehow gets there. And he's hanging around there, dressed with still his marathon stuff on, looking scruffy as hell, unable to communicate, scared, lost, hungry. And what did Kennedy Airport do? They threw him out. So he got on the subway, and he didn't know where he was going. So day 2, he's just sort of wandering around on the subway. He's beside himself. He's been reported lost now. The cops are aware he's lost. Everybody's sort of looking for him. And what happened? A police officer named Man Yam got on the subway heading for Lower Manhattan yesterday, and he sat down with the Daily News, and he was reading the story about this marathon runner and, shaking his head. And then he looked up, and there the guy is, across from him. And he said the man's lips were dry and trembling. He was looking left, looking right, looking left, looking right. He kept turning, looking to the map. He seemed like he was under duress, like he was lost or not knowing where he was going. And the police officer got up and showed him his badge and said police, polizia. He was trying to say in any language he could. And he, motioned to him, come with me. And he did. They got off the subway together. The cop did what any cop would do. He bought the guy a donut. And coffee. And and then the poor guy knew he was safe. He smiled. He realized that he'd been found. And anyway, the Italian consulate said that apart from minor dehydration, he was in good health. And he's scheduled to fly back to Italy today. Gian Claudio Marengo got more of an experience. He's 30 years old, never been to New York City, you imagine. Poor sweet soul. And it's so weird, he couldn't find, well, the description, it sounds like he wasn't real good at helping himself. And that might have to do with, whatever caused him to end up in, rehab in the first place, or his fragile sort of emotional nature. Whatever. New York can be pretty damn intimidating, even for people who speak English. But it is amazing that he couldn't find help of some sort, even to approach a policeman. Sad. Anyway, it ends okay. God. So, this guy named Joe Nacero has been a opinion writer for the New York Times for a little bit of time. Not one of their major guys. And he had a column a day or two ago that started with explanation of what his job is, and that his job is to write informed opinions that are provocative. Provocative, not necessarily meaning get your goat, but provocative to provoke thought. And he said, and, I hope I've done that. But this is my last column, and what I want to do is just give you a few things I never got around to writing a full column about. But here's some opinions I have, and he had like 3 or 4 things. But it's the first one. He's, by the way, going where almost every columnist I know wants to go. He's going to the sports section. I got to tell you, the greatest writers, there is no doubt in my mind that some of the greatest writing you'll ever find in any newspaper, not all, but I'm saying sports columnists have some of the greatest writing. They just do. Anyway, that's what he wanted to do. And sports, it's easier. It's so much easier. It's like, it's like if you're a racehorse and you get put out, to stud. Hey, man, you mean I get paid for doing this? I mean, it's just great. Every day there's a new story, a narrative of it, sports. Easy. Slam dunk. But here's Joe Nacero's idea, and it has to do with gun control. I think it's brilliant. He says, I'm thinking about Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York. Michael Bloomberg, one of the richest men in the country, and the former mayor, and a guy who puts his money where his mouth is. And one of the big things when he left office, even before he left office, was he wanted to do something about the gun nut culture in this country. And Forbes has said he's worth about $40 billion, give or take. And so he started a major anti-gun advocacy group called, and the fact that you don't know the name of it shows how much it didn't work. But Bloomberg did, on his own time, his own dime, establish this thing called Every Town for Gun Safety. And it hasn't had a lot of success because, what has? Nothing has. Nothing has. So Joe Nacero had an idea. He said, wait a minute. If he's worth $40 billion and he really cares about this, how about he buys one of the major gun companies? In other words, Michael Bloomberg buys Smith & Wesson. $1 billion. Say it costs it's about $1 billion. Maybe they hold him up $1.5 billion. He buys it. Well, now he's a purveyor in the old marketplace. And that's where he could have an impact. Nacero says owning a gun company would allow him to take a different kind of leadership role on issues like improving gun safety and imposing universal background checks. If Bloomberg owned Smith & Wesson, it could make a smart gun, a gun that only its owner can use. Now, gun companies today won't make them, won't sell them, for fear of retaliation by this name, the National Rifle Association. But a Bloomberg-owned gun company has more potential to affect change in this country's gun culture than anything else Nacero can think of. I think it's a good idea. I bet Bloomberg looked at it and laughed. But it would seem you could sort of like undercut. I don't know. It's easy for him to tell Bloomberg. But if Bloomberg cared, and if he thought, hey, maybe there is something. I know Bloomberg cares. Maybe there is something to that. I'm just saying. I thought it was interesting and worth passing on. Another thing I read a few days ago was that the district attorney here, who was just reelected, no one ran against him. God, I hate that. Oh, and by the way, I want to tell you something. So I go to my polling place, and I don't see a guy who's usually there. And I asked where he was. And the woman said to me, yeah, he quit last year. I said, why? And she said, conscientious objection. I said, wait a minute. He stopped being a poll person who, puts the little thing in the and tells you how to, because he's a conscientious objector to what? And her eyebrows went up, and she said, she pointed to the machine I was about to vote on. I said, are you kidding me? And she said, no. She said, do you trust him? These are poll watchers. They're the ones who you get to the top and stick the thing in. This guy's no dummy. This guy was smart as hell. And he must have felt, I'm now my eyes are peeled. I'm looking to bump into him in the neighborhood. I know he lives right near me. He, I guess, really decided that he could not, he'd done it for decades, that he couldn't do this anymore because he did not trust that the process that he cared so much about and was involved in was honest in a way, was really counting people's votes. Oh my God. And I said to the woman who's sort of replaced him, well, geez. And, she didn't seem to think it was odd that he felt that way. So I'm thinking, wait a minute. So the people who are like really working with the machines, they don't think they work. They don't trust them at all. She called him a conscientious objector. Oh my God. That was dispiriting right before I voted. And I voted a straight Democratic ticket, but I just can't do the one button thing. I can't do it. I can't. It's because I just can't. So I went all the way through everyone. And that did allow me not to vote for certain people. Like I skipped some races where I didn't want to. Those retention races drive me nuts. I always like not voting no in some of those retention races because anyone in a judicial position who gets in is in for life, it seems. You can't ever get rid of any of them. And I just try to remember, okay, did I read some article in which this judge said some really obnoxious, despicable thing? Yeah, I did. No. All right. And maybe it's counted. I don't know. Anyway, the district attorney, that'd be Stephen Zappala, says he wants to equip the courts with the ability to order those GPS-equipped ankle thingamajigs that would be worn, they're worn like for, people who are serving house arrest or something like that. And they would be worn by somebody who has threatened domestic violence or has a PFA or something like that. Somebody's considered truly, potentially a danger. And that way, there can be, he can be told, don't you go anywhere near her house, her mother's house, her workplace, and we will know the minute you do, and we will pick you up. So I guess the DA is asking at a budget hearing for money to I think that sounds like a really good idea if they can fund it. Because the way things work now, You often can't even get a PFA until you've suffered some harm at the hands of someone. And then when you do get a PFA, I mean, I don't think it's like holding up a piece of paper to protect you from some guy who's got a gun. It doesn't really do anything. So that was just something I thought that was of interest. Let me think. Oh, other things of interest. Talking about yesterday, the Vatican stuff. So more is out. I'm going to read you something from Reuters. I'm not going to read it, but... So financial investigators are now saying that the department in the Vatican that oversees the real estate holdings of the church has probably been used for money laundering. I mean, my God, money laundering. So listen to this. And the funniest thing is the names of these places. I say a department. So it's, get this. The department called the Administration of the Patrimony of the Holy See. Those are the guys that oversee the gazillions in real estate holdings. What is it again? The patrimony of the Administration of the Patrimony. Why wouldn't it be administration of the real estate of the Holy See? Why would they call that patrimony? Anyway, is saying, the investigators are saying, it looks like they've been engaged in money laundering, insider trading, market manipulation. In fact, the Vatican has turned over all of their information to the Swiss and Italian justice ministries, because much of this money laundering and manipulation happened in those two countries. So they're passing that on for criminal investigation. And the division that handles the Vatican's stock portfolio, Jesus. Wait, I think that's got a funny name too. Because it's not. No, the bank is called the Institute for Works of Religion. That's the bank. What? What does filthy lucre have to do with works of religion? So there's that going on. And the guy who got arrested the other day, who's in the jail in the Vatican, he worked at the Administration of the Patrimony of the Holy See for years. And so he'd be one of the people that was trying to keep things covered up. When he ends up on this committee that's supposed to be investigating things. Then he ends up leaking. Anyway, he is on trial in 2 cases, the first of which he is charged with conspiracy to smuggle $22 million into Italy from Switzerland. And it wasn't for his purposes. It was to help pay, so friends could avoid paying taxes. So he said, give me your money, and I'll launder it, I'll pull it through our patrimonial, Holy See, God knows what, and I'll get it there for you. Well, apparently they caught him. So he was using the Vatican Bank for money laundering. He, of course, said he wasn't. Then you got guys named postulators. Do you know what those are? Postulators, my sister referred to this yesterday. Postulators are Vatican officials who promote cases being made for sainthood. So groups get together and they think, oh, God, Father, this and that, he was a saint. We got to get the Vatican to, got to get this process started. And there are people in the Vatican then you hand all this stuff over to. They're called postulators. And, oh, my God, turns out that if those postulators don't get big, big gifts of lots of money, anyone's attempt to get sainthood for some poor schmo ain't going nowhere. So the postulators, yeah, he was a saint, huh? How much of a saint was he, huh? Is he a $2 million saint or a $3 million saint? Oh, my God. Listen to this one. Okay, so one of these books that's coming out says this. Monsignor Giuseppe Sciacca, top official in the Vatican, in the administration of the Vatican, he thought his fancy schmancy apartment was not fancy enough. And so when his neighbor was hospitalized, you can't believe this, when his neighbor was hospitalized for a rather long hospitalization, Monsignor Sciacca just broke down the wall separating their residences and friggin' incorporated the guy's room into his apartment, furniture and all. He stole the guy's apartment next door.
A real classy act over there.
Jeez. All right. The other book, which is called Avarice, is out tomorrow. And it also claims that the Vatican set up a foundation to support a children's hospital, and people, giving money for that hospital for the kids would not be happy to know that a ton of that money went toward the renovation of the apartment of the Vatican's number 2 at the time, Cardinal somebody or other. Bertoni. I got one more. The book also recounts hugely expensive maintenance work. Well, this is what happens anytime there's a totally opaque system, right? Is what happens. Hugely expensive maintenance work at inflated prices. And claims, get this, that one of the Holy See's departments was in negotiations with Philip Morris Tobacco Company. I can't even get my head around this one. To promote Philip Morris cigarettes. The Vatican was going to promote Philip Morris cigarettes for a fee. And they would receive, a bunch of cardinals would receive a discount on up to 200 packs of cigarettes a month. Oh, boy. The poor Pope. I mean, I don't know how you clean up a mess like that. I mean, it's corrupt it's rotten. It's rotten. And all those people, it's like the civil service or the bureaucracy in our government. Popes come and go. Presidents come and go. But that structure, the civil service structure or the Vatican governance, that stays. And they're the guys that keep things running, that know how it runs, and even if it runs in this kind of despicable way, whatever. Okay, going to try to pick up on some of your emails here. Ray writes about patrimony. It is property handed down as a historic inheritance. Okay, so the office of patrimony of the Holy See would be stuff they have inherited, like beautiful cathedrals and castles and stuff like that, probably. And who knew they could be used as washing machines? We got another email here saying, I don't know how much success every town for gun safety has had, but you may find it interesting that the father of Allison Parker, that poor woman who was shot on live television, has been working with them. Well, yeah, but think of all the, okay, I'm sure, but when Gabby Giffords was almost killed, and she, high profile, and her high profile astronaut husband, they got together and they started an organization, and man, everybody thought, oh, they can do it. No. I don't mean to be negative about it, because I think eventually Americans wake up. I think. Just hope it's not too late. Ansel writes about voting. I cannot push that straight Democratic ticket button either. I feel like first of all, it's embarrassing. It's like you didn't do your homework. It's like, oh, she's, and I don't want to just do it, bang, and I'm out, because then everyone knows you did it straight. But I don't think that's why I don't do it. I want to just see. I see how the ballot looks, how it's... Anyway, Ansel says, I say this after each election, but it would be really nice to be able to visit some website prior to voting, enter your polling location, review your specific ballot. There's always something unexpected on the ballot, it seems. I agree with you. You want to go through carefully. And if you didn't talk about it already, what do you think about the Ohio weed vote? I can't believe they didn't approve at least medicinal pot. Well, they didn't have, it wasn't written that way. It was an all or nothing thing. It was, you had to vote yay or nay on should we allow both medicinal and recreational marijuana and to be controlled by this specific entity that will grow it and retail it and all this stuff. And so even people who were for medicinal pot but who didn't want to turn it over to a group of rich investors who wanted their dominion over an industry to be enshrined in the Ohio Constitution, which I guess is where it would have been. I mean, come on. Everyone knows that eventually the big boys will take over pot. Why? Because they take over everything. If there's money to be made, then the little people get swept aside and the big boys come in. That's just the way it is. We seem to accept it. I don't. It drives me insane. But that's the way America, the land of opportunity, works. Oh, Clarence. Clarence said for the first time ever, I pushed the straight Democratic button. All right. Well, Yep. Apparently so did a whole hell of a lot of other Pennsylvanians. So I don't understand. They do that, vote flat out Democrat, and then they elect Pat Toomey senator, or they put an entire Republican Senate and House in. I mean, do they have any sense of what it is your vote's trying to do? Your vote's trying to create a certain kind of government that will function and do the kinds of things that you think are wise. Why would you set up a government that can't function? And believe me, when you give Republicans the keys, that's what you get. They don't believe in it. They don't believe in government. And so when given the government, well, you see what they do. They do nothing. And they get paid for it, which is a hell of a gig. William writes regarding Monsignor Sciacca, he's the guy in the Vatican who, when his neighbor got hospitalized, knocked down the wall and literally appropriated the guy's apartment. William writes, we need a Vatican version of the great BBC comedy, Yes, Minister, about the bureaucracy staying in place in spite of a new minister. Okay, I never saw Yes, Minister, but yeah, that's what it's about. It's not, I'm sure presidents find out, cabinet heads find out, any head of the Pentagon finds out that there's just so much they can do because they are momentarily passing by, passing through. And the guys that have worked in the Pentagon and any other department you want to name for 20 years, 25, 30, 35, 40, they've seen these people come and go. And they are the ones who run it. Same as the Vatican. So I don't know how much Pope Francis can do. Jeez. I mean, for one thing, you could take somebody like this Monsignor Sciacca and toss him out on his ear. Or charge. I mean, how can you do that? Was he charged with theft? I mean, with appropriate. I don't know what. How could somebody have the chutzpah to do that? It's just mind-boggling, really. All right. What we got? Oh, and this thing I was talking to you about, how class action suits are dead and gone, and they are. And the New York Times it's not easy reading, but it's appalling. While we weren't looking, one of the little guy's chief ways of fighting the big boys has been taken away. And we will not be surprised to hear by the Roberts Supreme Court. But listen to this. So the third installment gets into something even more extraordinary. And this is that there are companies in this country that you can work for, and you're signing one of those contracts that you don't even realize you're signing, and you'd probably sign anyway because you want the damn job. And it says that if there's any issue, we, the company, will go to arbitration. But some of the arbitration in some of these companies is religious. So get this. Some poor guy got stuck in a drug and alcohol place that was supposed to help him. It was Christian run. They not only didn't help the guy, it turns out once they got their hands on him, they tried to, as he put it in a letter to his family, gay me. And he wrote to him, God makes all things new. The weirdest thing is, how do I come out as straight after all this time? His family knew something was really going wrong. He had been sent to this place by a judge as an alternative to prison. Got himself in trouble. The judge says, you go to this place. Okay, so went he did. It was a place called Teen Challenge. Well, let's just say this. He's dead. He's dead. His family took Teen Challenge to court, and it turned out that their claim, they couldn't get to a court. It had to be resolved through a mediation or arbitration process that would be bound not by state law, not by federal law, but by the Bible. The rules of the preceding state, quote, the Holy Scripture shall be the supreme authority. Now, in America, we got state legislatures passing this, these absurd laws banning Sharia law from ever being in the United States. I got news for you guys. There already are religious courts in the United States that are depriving people of access to the judicial court system. And you know what? These guys are winning in court because people are scared to death of the First Amendment issue about letting churches pretty much have their way. So the New York Times found that companies have essentially created an alternative system of justice, and Americans are simply being forced out of court and into arbitration. And when you add the religious component that some companies have, you take the privatization of justice even further. And some of these religious organizations that go to arbitration and then unbelievably lose because it almost never happens, as soon as they lose, they immediately go right into the secular courts to overturn the so-called biblically based. So and if you read the stories, your hair curls. I remember once getting a catalog from a group called Carolina Cabin Rentals. And there was beautiful cabins you could rent in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it turns out they're one of the ones that if I had decided, okay, I'm going to take one of your cabins for a week, I would have signed a contract that said that any issues I might have with them would be resolved according to biblical principles. Welcome to America. Jeez. Okay, well, I'm going out into this, what was the term? Estival. Into this estival day in November. And I hope you can get into it too. And we'll talk tomorrow. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.